Hi everyone, I am Annalisa Arsaholga. So in this video, I'm going to discuss the chapter 8, which is designing and evaluating portfolio assessment in the classroom. Okay, so before anything else, I have here the intended learning outcome. So at the end of the chapter, you should be able to develop portfolio assessment and evaluate portfolio assessment utilized in the classroom. Okay, so this chapter describes the process of planning and implementing portfolio assessment in the classroom. So, in this chapter, we will clarify the steps in designing and evaluating portfolio. So, throughout the discussion, we will know the general procedure that you may use in crafting and implementing portfolio assessment in the classroom. Okay, so first, let's define what is portfolio development. Okay, so I know most of the people pag napakinggan nila ang salitang portfolio there are many different images that comes up to their mind. Okay, so maybe other people think about compiling your works. See, so for example, sa teacher, so it may be their lesson plan or documents that reflect their knowledge and skills. No, so portfolio development requires the learners to collect and integrate examples of their works and allows the teacher to assess their learners as well. So the assessment tool provides opportunities for the both learners and teachers to better understand the education process in a wider perspective. Okay, so in designing portfolio assessment, it requires some advanced and careful planning. So it begins with a clear idea about the purpose of the assessment. So below are the following steps provide a general directions for developing portfolio assessment. So I have heard these steps for developing portfolio assessment. So the first one is identify overall purpose and focus. So the designs and use of portfolio must begins with a clear description of your purpose and focus. So with this, you can clearly identify why you want your student to create a portfolio. No, so as a teacher kay dapat ka nang before ka magpabuhat sa o ka ng portfolio sa imong student, dapat ka nang nanakay ka na ang purpose or goal or kan objective kanang gipabuhat nimo na sila ha. Okay, so I have here the list of how to prepare and use portfolio. So this question can be your guide in preparing to use portfolio. Okay, so the first one is we have who will construct a portfolio. The second one is what type of portfolio do you want to use? Next is what are the purposes and objectives of the portfolio? Then what categories of work samples should go into the portfolios? So the fifth one is what criteria will student or groups use to select their entries? Then the last one is who will develop the rubrics to assess and evaluate the portfolios? Okay, so portfolios may be used to assess understanding but are ideal for assessing product, scale, and reasoning targets. Okay, so students also develop metacognitive and decision-making skills as with other performance assessment. Porf- Portfolios generally are not very efficient for assessing knowledge targets. So according to Macmillan 2007. Okay, so dapat our portfolio's content and learn targets kay magmatch siya with the curriculum standards and goals. No, So I have here the example of assessing reading skills performance, which shows the alignment of teaching and learning goal, activities, and assessment tasks, which includes portfolio evidence. Okay, so the first goal is we have the code. So basic reading skills for beginning or weak readers. Okay, no, so our sample classroom activity is read simple text. Okay, so our portfolio evidence are word bank or less of words mastered. So selected text I can read, completed reading tests, reading on cassette. So our assessment tools are individual progress report, so peer complement or self or peer assessment checklist and rating skills. Okay, so our second goal is understand simple text like narrative and expository types. Okay, so our sample classroom activity are read familiar story and practice scanning ends, TV guide, identify main points and details in a news report. Okay, so our portfolio evidence are cassette of story read, reading strategies checklist, completed reading test and corrected test item. Okay, so our assessment tools are self or peer assessment checklist, grading skills and answer key. Okay, so our third goal is appreciate literature like stories and poems, read in class, for example, understanding character and theme. So our sample classroom activity are semi-extensive reading activities that is both guided and independent reading. Okay, so our portfolio evidence are reading slugs, reading journal, book test, cassette, video clips, and artwork. So our assessment tools is peer self or peer assessment checklist. Okay, so our fourth goals is reading for pleasure. So extensive reading. So our sample classroom activity is sustain silent reading in class as well as at home. So our portfolio evidence, a log of books, booklets, reading cards, news articles, read reading tests and comment cards. So our assessment tools are teachers' record of student reading, reading skill relating to content and presentation and language. Okay, so our last goal is use simple information tools or resource materials. So our sample classroom activity or work with glossary and table of contents, dictionary, search engines, encyclopedias. So our portfolio evidence are dictionary exercises, alphabetizing, matching definitions to words, so synonyms, antonyms, etc. So our assessment tools is appropriate information found, partially found, and not found. Okay, so now let's move on to the second steps for developing portfolio assessment. Okay, so it is identify the physical structure. So once the purpose and targets have been classified, so we need to think of the physical structure of the portfolio. So some practical questions affect the successful use of portfolio in your classroom. Okay, so I have here the some practical questions. So the first one is what it will look like. The second one is where will the students place the outputs? Next is what type of container is appropriate? Do they need like folders, clear books, plastic bins? How are the materials to be organized categorically, numerically, alphabetically, by subject area, or in the other ways. So the last one is, where can students store the portfolios for easy access? Okay, so if student cannot manage and access their materials effectively, so they will become discouraged. So you mean need your original intentions, no? So based on the answer to practical considerations. So choices of products and works outputs influence student on what to include in their portfolio. Okay, so my reports end here. So Miss Sarah Jane will continue the reporting on steps for developing portfolio assessment.
Good day, everyone. This is the continuation of our report in Chapter 8, Designing and Evaluating Portfolio Assessment in the Classroom. But before that, let me introduce myself first. To those who don't know me yet, I am Sarah Jane P. Sordilla from BS Ed Filipino 3. The third step for developing portfolio is determine the appropriate organization and sources of content. A portfolio should include a variety of entries, students' products, for example, projects, assignments, and activity records, for example, participation logs or performances. These naturally are artifacts which are derived from the different learning activities. When we say the artifacts, it provides tangible evidence of student performance and learning progress. The range of portfolio samples is determined by the subject matter and its instructional approach. The specific content depends on the subject and instructional approach. These are the examples of artifacts for portfolios by subject area. The subject areas here are language arts, mathematics, sciences, and social studies. Artifacts vary based on subject matter. Macmillan 2007 pointed out to use work samples that capitalize on the advantage of portfolios, such as flexibility, individuality, and authenticity. Work samples should be chosen to reflect students' real experiences and learning processes. Ensure variation in work samples, allowing students to display individual achievements. Now let's proceed to the fourth step, which is determine student reflection guidelines. Before starting a portfolio assessment, it's important to set guidelines that encourage students to reflect on their own work. This helps them take ownership of their learning and work together with the teacher. These are the examples of questions which are helpful in determining student reflections. These questions help the students gain metacognitive skills, including self-reflection and assessment. For example, describe the steps that you use to complete today's activity. Which steps really help you complete the activity and which ones were less useful? What would you change next time? And so on. The reflection questions help students think about their strengths, challenges, and progress, allowing them to assess their own work and identify areas for improvement. This process helps students develop important skills like self-reflection and problem solving. The fifth step is identify and evaluate scoring criteria. After setting student reflection guidelines, the next step is to establish clear scoring criteria to evaluate student performance. Involving students in developing these criteria helps them take ownership of the process and fosters collaboration with the teacher. However, as the teacher, you are responsible for ensuring that the scoring criteria are reliable and of high quality. To achieve this, share the criteria with your students beforehand so they can understand how their work will be evaluated. ask questions, and offer suggestions. This is an example of math problem-solving portfolio rating form. Content categories might include problem solving, estimation, problem 1, among others. And these are the questions that will be used to ask the learners. Example, what does the problem say about you as a problem solver? What do you like best about how you solve in this problem? And so on. In a math problem solving portfolio, the scoring criteria might include categories like problem solving, mathematical knowledge, strategic knowledge, and communication, each with a rating scale that reflects different levels of achievement. When evaluating the criteria, ensure they align with the portfolio's purpose and curriculum goals. Reliability is crucial, meaning that the criteria should yield consistent results if applied by different teachers. This helps ensure fairness and accuracy in assessing students' progress. This is only my part and it will be continued by my group mate. Thank you for watching.
Good evening, everyone. I am Precious Chinarjore, and I am the third reporter on the Chapter 8 entitled Designing and Evaluating Portfolio Assessment in the Classroom. So let's proceed and communicate the results of portfolio evaluation. The final step in implementing portfolio assessment is to conduct a conference with each student to review its contents, the student's reflections, and assessment of the individual output. So you should give your students guidelines for these conferences so that they can prepare some questions ahead of time and allow the students to give their views and insights during the conference. As a result, this serves as an avenue to determine the strengths and limitations of portfolio for plan of action formulation. And portfolios can encourage or can help students to take more ownership and responsibility over the learning process. Following is a checklist for implementing and using portfolio. First, we have, are students knowledgeable about what a portfolio is and how it will be used? Do students know why portfolios are important? Are the students responsible for or involved in selecting the content? Is there a sufficient number of work samples but not too many? Is a table of contents included? Are specific self-evaluation questions provided? Is the checklist of contents complete? Are scoring criteria for individualized teacher-written comments provided? Are student-teacher conferences included? So these are the checklists for implementing and using portfolio. These are the basis of what are inside of the checklist that are needed in implementing and using portfolio. Let's proceed to the second one, the portfolio evaluation. First, we have the student evaluation. One advantage of portfolio assessment is allowing the students to revisit, reflect, and evaluate their own work. This allows them to practice critiquing and conceptualizing the quality of their work based on the criteria performance. This also provides an opportunity for students to become better achievers as they learn to reflect on their strengths and weaknesses. Teacher as a model should be the first person to demonstrate the skills in evaluating and critiquing portfolio. Once the students understand the process and the principle of evaluating, they can start to engage with their own reflection and establish a comfortable, confident, and reliable analysis and critique of their own work. Some questions can be asked to facilitate student self-reflection for individual work, which give insights into how students have been reaching the learning targets. First, we have, why did you select this piece of writing? What did you learn from the selection? Can you identify your strengths and weaknesses? What problems have you encountered in doing the task? Which is the most satisfying experience? What are your insights after reading the poem? Is this your best work? What kind of work would you like to do in the future? Let's proceed to the second one, the teacher evaluation. Evaluating a portfolio involves making judgments about students' outputs. The teacher can use numerical scores to summarize judgment or qualitative system. So the scoring needs to be reliable and should not be affected by inconsistencies and not related to the qualities being judged. As a rule of thumb, it is important to remember that the purpose of portfolio is to assess the students' outcomes of the instructional goals. The samples of entries are indicators whether students have achieved the goals of instruction, which are evaluated based on the portfolio's enter content, structure, and individual entries. In most of the classroom situations, the teacher is both the observer and the rater. If there are some important instructional decisions to be made, additional raters must be considered in order to make scoring more fair. The third one is the student-teacher conference. As mentioned in the steps in developing portfolio assessment, the final step is to conduct a conference with each student to review the contents, reflections, and evaluation. It should be scheduled throughout the year, which provides important link between the students and teachers. Your students can be responsible for conducting the conference, and this will serve as a motivating force for the learners to produce excellent portfolio in the future. According to Macmillan 2007, he pointed out that students need to compare their reflections with their evaluations and make plans for subsequent work. Although weaknesses and areas for improvement need to be covered, emphasize students' progress and achievements as well. Lastly, we have a portfolio development checklist. All you have to do is to know what purpose will your portfolio serve. If that applies to you, you can check any of that. For example, if the number 1, prepare a sample of past work for future teachers to see nag-apply sa imuha, so checkan nimo na siya. For example, communicate to parents what has been learned, evaluate my teaching, so on and so forth. That will be all for my report. Thank you so much for listening.